Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another Revival Method podcast. My name is Dr. Brandon Parker. I'm your host and also the founder of the Revival Method. The Revival Method is an online coaching experience where we optimize your sleep, stress, and nutrition. And we also give you a 100% individualized program that's designed to restore and strengthen your range of motion. Now, today is all about answering your questions. So I went on Instagram, I put out onto my story, hey, what questions do you have for me? And instead of me giving you a couple of words and then going on to the next one, I felt like I could make it into a podcast and really address some of these questions in depth. So the first one is describe your journey. I want to keep it short because I want this to be very practical and not about me. But to make it very concise here is I started off as somebody that was really obsessed with getting bigger, faster, and stronger. My brother, who played football as well, he got a scholarship to go play Division 1 football. And coming from a single parent home, that was our only way to really put us through college without going into severe debt. So my thoughts were the bigger and faster and stronger that I became, the more likely that I would score a scholarship and not have to go into extreme debt. And that just led me to reading every single thing that I could about strength and conditioning. And it was working. I was getting the results that I was looking to get, but the sad tale is there's only a certain amount of people that are going to get a scholarship, and I wasn't one of them. Near the end of my high school career, I tore my shoulder. And for lack of better words, people don't want to pay for damaged goods. So my focus went from strength and conditioning, becoming bigger, faster, and stronger. And then it started to shift into how can I restore my range of motion in my shoulder so it doesn't feel unstable, it doesn't feel like it's crunchy and not able to move well, back to where it should be feeling good. Because prior to me focusing on that, my shoulder will dislocate if I put it into a particular position. That's not good. So I went from reading every single thing that I could about getting bigger, faster, and stronger. And then I started to go into how can I make sure that my shoulder is as healthy as possible. Between these two obsessions of mine, I wanted to further my education. So I went to University of South Florida where I specialized, or my major was exercise science. I had amazing mentors there where I learned how to optimize with fat loss without it taking over your life, how to get bigger, faster, and stronger, and how to optimize biomechanics so people can be the most efficiently an efficient mover, if you will. Um, During that time, I was at a strength and conditioning sports performance gym where I had the ability to work with professional athletes, but also I worked with the average Joes. And it was really cool to see the difference between the two types of people. And spoiler alert, there really wasn't a large difference. The massive difference was, yeah, the person that I was working with was like 6'7", 300 pounds, where I had this mother over here was just an average mom, but it was the same anatomy and they both adapted the same way once you met them where they were. Now, this professional athlete, their job was to be athletic, was to stress the body out and force an adaptation. Whereas this mom did want an adaptation, but you had to figure out how to fit it into their lifestyle so it wasn't overwhelming or it wasn't too much, and you were just aiding into some of the previous injuries that they came in with. So during that time, I got to really understand the body and how it worked and how you can get it to adapt. So after a while, I felt like I was the bottleneck. I wanted to learn more. So then I went to chiropractic school where I started to learn how to rehab injuries efficiently and effectively. Because to be blunt, right now, the current landscape of the healthcare model, which I'm in America, it doesn't look good because we get rewarded by doing all these passive modalities, which just means like most of your physical therapy appointments or chiropractic appointments will be heat and stim, those electric pads that they put on your back. They might put ultrasound on you, where research shows ultrasound doesn't even do anything for you. And then all these needless small little things that they can charge your insurance for, but doesn't really move the needle in how well you move and feel. So I wanted to be the change. I wanted to make sure that when I got out of school, I was fully armed and ready to go to really help somebody make that adaptation. Because once again, there was no real difference between the athletic professional and the mom of two who's just trying to lose some body fat. They both adapted. You just had to create the perfect program for them to adapt. So after I graduated from chiropractic school, I was a valedictorian of my class. I then went into practice where I practice in person still, but then I started to post online videos to help my in-person practice patients where they didn't know how to squat, they didn't know how to do certain exercises. So I started to do demos, and these demos went viral. And now I have this platform to help as many people as I possibly can. And it's an honor. It's a blessing and an honor. And to be frank, it also stresses me out because now I have this opportunity and this responsibility to get you this information so you can better your life. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're listening to this podcast, and I'm super receptive to any questions because if you have a question, then probably 100 plus more people do have the same question, and I want to answer it and give you the tools that you need to succeed. So that's a little bit of my story in a nutshell. I hope that was super concise, but when you ask somebody like, hey, how'd you get here? Yeah, there's a lot to cover. So the second question would be, if I'm a beginner, where do I start? And I always like to say, everything that you do should have at least a loose goal around it. Now, I don't want this to be I don't want this to be strict because some people need to get out of their own heads, right? They're too goal oriented and they just need to use movement as a play, right? Like to get out of their own head, just move around a little bit, enjoy yourself. These are the people that really enjoy dance, right? This is the time where they don't have to think about all the details. But back to what I was saying is if you have a loose goal where you know that like, okay, I don't squat too well, or I know that I need to lose a little bit of weight because I'm just not feeling my best, that loose goal will start to create a program that you can start to follow. So if you're a beginner, understand what you're trying to achieve because that's going to inform what movements that you should be doing or where your focus should lie. So, to give you an example, let's say you're somebody that has lower back pain and you are fearful to bend over and pick something off the floor. Well, now I know that we need to restore strength and confidence into that lower back. So maybe 1 to 3 times per week, I'm going to pick exercises that you feel comfortable with, that you can build that you can build confidence in. Also, you're going to be building strength in the same area as well. So when you go to pick something off the floor, you know for a fact nothing is going to go wrong. Do you see where I'm coming from? Let's flip the script a little bit here. Let's say that your goal is to lose body fat. Okay? We know that in order to lose body fat optimally, the majority of your lifestyle changes is going to come from your diet. But what does that exercise look like? Well, when we are in a caloric deficit, meaning we're losing weight, we are going to need to do things that's going to tell our body to preserve the muscle mass that we currently have. You want to have more muscle on your frame for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the more muscle that you have on your body, the more calories you're going to need to survive, right? Somebody that is 180 pounds, somebody that's 200 pounds at the same body fat ratio, that 200-pound person is going to need more calories to survive. And that's awesome. So that means when you go on a diet, you don't feel like you're super restrictive because you have more calories to play with. Not to mention, the more muscle that you have, you're going to be stronger. That means you're going to be less likely to be injured in the future. Hello, that's pretty awesome, right? On top of that, there's a couple of other reasons, but we want to make sure that we are exercising to make sure we're preserving that muscle mass. Okay. Then what I would say is if you're trying to lose weight, we have to create a caloric deficit. You can do that through reducing some of the fats that you are intaking, or you can reduce the number of carbs that you are taking. If you're somebody that doesn't want to do any of the counting, what you can simply do is just prioritize your protein sources and your fiber sources, which is vegetables. And chances are you're going to be reducing your overall caloric intake because you're going to be feeling fuller, right? Also, you can look into drinking a glass of water before eating your food, because that's also going to stretch the stomach in a good way because it has stretch response or stretch receptors. And it tells your brain, hey, I'm fuller quicker than it would if you were eating these calorically dense foods that don't really fill your stomach up physically. So I hope those two separate examples kind of paint you a picture, but it starts with a goal, and then we can start picking movements to fit that goal. If you're just somebody that's like, hey, I just want to start moving and feeling better, I always say stick with the basics. You got squats, hinges, pushes, pulls, and then carries. So those categories, if you just pick one exercise for each one of those categories, you'll find yourself super strong and you're covering all your bases. Okay. So that's where I would start with being a beginner. Now, that may all sound super overwhelming. So, another thing that I would say to a beginner is pick one thing and work on it until it no longer feels like you have to go out of your way to work on it. It's now streamlined, it's integrated into your current lifestyle. Okay. That's something that a lot of people will do wrong and they find themselves failing. If you try to change 5, 6, 7 different things in one sitting, you're going to do really good for a week, maybe a month. But I guarantee you're going to burn out because it's just too many things to focus on at once. Okay. So if you're a beginner, keep it very simple. Work on one thing at a time, even if that means that you're only adding 2 exercises in per week, right? Very simple, build over time. The next thing is, how do we maintain motivation? Motivation is something that's very it's almost like a mirage. Most people are chasing motivation, are chasing things to give them motivation, but they just don't understand that you are not going to have motivation until you have some sort of mastery in the thing that you're doing. Okay? So, we are typically motivated by the things that we get rewarded by. Okay. We do things that make us feel good, right? And we avoid things that make us feel bad. So, the very first couple months of you exercising or changing your lifestyle, it's going to be hard. You're going to need to use some discipline, right? Because not only is it new to you, you're going to, for lack of a better, you're going to suck at it, right? You're just not good at it because you're new at it. It's the same idea of hating to ride a bike because you don't know how to ride a bike. But once you know how to ride a bike, it's awesome, right? So the first couple of months, don't expect motivation. But in place of that, what we can do is use a little bit of discipline and set up our environment for success. Because I don't want you to burn out because you're using nothing but discipline, right? So let's say that you are planning to go to the gym 3 days per week, but you know that there's a couple of roadblocks that are in your day to day lifestyle. Perhaps there's large amounts of traffic between your work and home. So the chances of you going to work, coming home to change, and going back to the gym is slim to none. Pack a go bag. Pack a bag that has your gym clothes, that has your shoes, has your headphones in it, and have it by the front door. Or keep it in your car. Well, pack it in the car the day before. Greasing the groove and removing these roadblocks and friction is the key to not having to use all your discipline all at once. Also, back to what I was saying before, making sure you only start with one singular thing to improve on at a time. Because once again, if you're changing 7 different things and using all your discipline for each and every single one of those things, you'll burn out in a week and you wonder why things don't work for you, right? So just to recap, do not wait for motivation, right? Pick something that's simple for you to work on. And as you get better at it, then you'll start to build motivation because you're starting to reap the rewards of the things that you have been consistently doing. For example, the one thing that I have changed was my sleep patterns. It's very hard for me to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time 7 days per week. So even on the weekends now, I do still wake up at 5 a.m. That sounds crazy. I probably can't relate with a lot of you people because some people will probably say, "Hey, I'm not going to wake up early on the weekends. That's when I can catch up on my sleep." That's fine. But when I have regulated my sleep that one thing I focused on, it gave me much, much more energy. Now I have more energy to do the things that I've been essentially hiding from because of how difficult I was viewing them. So pick one thing, work on it slowly, and then you can always add over time. The next thing is, how do you build mobility? So mobility is a pretty catch-all phrase, right? You see it on Instagram. You have people doing all these wacky drills that look really cool, but when you really think about it, don't really make a large change. So let's define mobility. My definition of mobility is the ability to access the ranges of motion that you want to be in, and also be very strong in them. Because when you can access the range of motions that you want to access because of the goals that you have, you're no longer restricted. But then we also want to make sure that we're strong in those positions so you're less likely to be injured in those activities as well. So that is my definition of mobility. So how do we build that? Once again, it kind of comes back to that loose goal, right? Kind of back to what I was saying with that lower back issue. But I'm going to change the example to give you a little bit more perspective. So let's say somebody is dealing with some knee pain and they experience it when they are going upstairs. That's telling me that the body has the inability to handle the body's load on one given leg. So, how do we build strength throughout the knee joint to ensure that it can handle an activity like that? Okay. So, I want to first think about what the climbing of stairs is. Well, it's very similar to a step up, it's very similar to a lunge. And my assumption would be those two exercises would be too much for the participant that's complaining about the knee. I'm going to regress those movements to, let's say, a bodyweight squat. And if that doesn't work, maybe we'll do a bodyweight squat that has reduced range of motion. So now you are doing a box squat, right? Or maybe you're just doing an iso squat, like you get down into a squat position as low as you're comfortable with and hold it. So you see, now we're going to be building up the quads. We're going to be building up the glutes and the hamstrings with these movements that you can handle. And once you master them, it's as simple as adding more weight or progressing to the next more complex movement. So it does come down to understanding biomechanics and also understanding how you can manipulate exercise for your benefit. But building mobility is very simple. It's find out what you can't do and then make it as easy as possible for you to do something similar to that. You can't climb upstairs with one leg, then let's find an exercise you can do with two legs. Build strength there and try to ease back into that position. Here's an example. I had a client who had severe rotator cuff issues. He couldn't put his arm above his head without severe pain. He couldn't put his arm behind his back without severe pain. He couldn't touch the top of his shoulder without the pain as well. So what did we do? Well, with the rotator cuff, we know that the further the elbow travels away from the body, the more the rotator cuff is going to be active and a lot more tension is going to be placed on it. So we modified a lot of his pushing and pull exercises by putting that elbow close to the body and having him exercise there. The rotator cuff is still going to be in use in these positions, but it's going to be much more supported by the pec, the lat, and other supporting musculature. During this time that you're building strength in that position, you can then slowly start to let that elbow travel away, progressively shifting more and more tension to that rotator cuff. Then what we did with him is we had him at a flat bench press, and over time we inched up the bench press until he was eventually pressing above his head. So I hope that paints a picture where we really focused on progressing the range of motion of the exercise over time according to what his current pain tolerance was. So that is another example how we restored mobility in his shoulder. And then the next question is, I have been dieting, but I haven't been losing weight. Okay. So there's a couple things that have been going on here. And I think that this probably, I feel like all these questions deserve their own episode, so I can really go deep on them. But here's a couple things. One, A lot of people think that they're in a caloric deficit and they're just not. So this could be due to the fact that they're just not really estimating their caloric intake well. And research has shown that humans are terrible at guessing how many calories they ate and guessing how many calories they burned. The average workout that is vigorous, I think, is like 30 minutes of vigorous activity. If you are a 200-pound person and you are just going at it for 30 straight minutes, you burn about 400 calories. That is equivalent to pieces of bread, or maybe 2 pieces of bread with a slice of butter on them. And when you start to put it that way, you're like, oh, okay, I really didn't burn a lot of calories. I didn't burn that much calories to what I think I was eating, right? So if we have this dilemma where most people feel like they're eating or they're burning more than what they're eating because they're eating much more, that can create an issue where you're either at maintenance or you're just not losing any weight, or you're probably maybe gaining weight. In these circumstances, when you adopt a super severe, super aggressive exercise plan to try to burn calories, you're gonna peter out really quickly, because unless you're built for it, a lot of people don't like high intensity, vigorous exercise every day. So I would look at your calories first, just to make sure you're truly eating what you think you're eating. A couple things that kind of sneak through the cracks is, what oils are you cooking with? 2 tablespoons of olive oil, I think, is 120 calories. And a lot of people coat their pans with so that the food doesn't stick to the pan. Other things would be drinking. Are you drinking things with calories? That can really sneak calories in there. Also, keep in mind when you look at the label, it may say 0 calories, but read the serving size. That's how a lot of people trick you. They'll say, oh, it's 0 calories, but it's only like, let's say, 1 squirt if you're using a PAM, if you will. But if you look at it, it's like, oh, well, I'm not doing 1 squirt. I'm probably doing like 4 squirts. And that's where you can start seeing the calories build up, because what they're trying to do is a marketing scheme. Oh, it's 0 calories. It's great. But they're using a serving size that is a quarter, if not less, of what you typically would use it for. Another thing that could be happening if you are dieting and you are not losing weight is perhaps you've been chronically dieting for too long. Okay. We have this thing, our body's amazing. It's called metabolic flexibility. Or it, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Metabolic flexibility. When we chronically undereat on calories, our body starts to down regulate all of its activity to match the caloric intake. So you see this with like bodybuilders that are in a huge caloric deficit, where the last couple weeks, where they're burning a lot of fat, but they feel lethargic. They don't even want to get off the couch. They feel irritable. They're always hungry. And that's because their body is telling them, hey, don't move because you're not putting any calories in right now. And we don't want to keep pulling from our fat stores. So if you're somebody that has been always like on a very low caloric intake diet, chances are your body has adapted to that level. And the last thing that you want to do is drop your calories even further, because some people do that, and it's just like the law of diminishing returns. Nobody can live off of 800 calories per day. It's very hard for a lot of people to eat a well-balanced diet at 1,200 calories per day, all depending on how much you weigh, of course. But my point being, you might have to explore a technique that we call reverse dieting. When you reverse diet, it's as simple as just adding more calories into your daily eating. You do it slowly, so you don't see this large uptick on this scale, but you start to notice that your body weight relatively stays the same. Your body temperature goes up because your body is more active and it's burning more calories. Your energy goes up, so you start to do things like fidget more, get up and grab a glass of water, things of that nature. And all in all, you just feel like your body is then actually running on all cylinders. When you spend time in a reverse diet phase and you start to get this energy expenditure back up again, then after, weeks and weeks and weeks where your body feels like it's fully functioning again, then you can explore going back into a deficit. But when you are chronically dieting, and your body is down regulated, you can't keep cutting calories. That's just going to go really bad really quickly. So that is two areas that I would say explore. Okay. And then the last thing is I have a sweet tooth. What can I do to satisfy it without without putting on excess body fat? So I'll give you what I do. I know that some people say eat fruit, and that does satisfy my sweet tooth a little bit, but I love ice cream. I adore ice cream. I try to minimize how much ice cream's in the house because if it's there, I'm gonna eat it. I love it. So what I actually invested in, it's called a Ninja Creamy, and it's as simple as it's a thing that makes things creamy, right? So I put Greek yogurt, protein powder, and some other things like mix-ins and whatnot, and I'll mix it up and it becomes this very cream-like substance, and then I put it in the freezer. Now if you're using a Greek yogurt that is already has like a vanilla flavoring that's already sweet, and then you add a little bit of protein powder that has a good taste according to you, that alone is going to taste really good. You add a little bit of almond milk, of course, to make it a little bit more creamy, or you can do regular milk. It's completely up to you. Between those three ingredients, you have this ice cream like substance that for me satisfies my sweet tooth, but also I'm getting quite a bit of protein in. So with the Greek yogurt, the little bit of protein powder, and a little bit of, I do regular milk, I'm going to be somewhere around 30-ish grams per serving. And it's limited added sugars. It's nothing more than what you're getting out of the Greek yogurt and the other ingredients. You can always sweeten with monk fruit if you want a little bit more of that sweet tooth. But I feel like it's been a real big game changer for me. This is just one example, of course, but I'll shout it to the I'll shout it to the mountaintops. I love ice cream. This has been an absolute game changer for me. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can work with. So I hope all these questions were answered to a point where you feel satisfied. I might do more of this if I get some good feedback. Because once again, when you're answering questions on Instagram, it's like 3, 4, 5 words tops before it gets like overwhelmingly like a block of text, and nobody wants to read that.